everybody doing tonight? How's everybody doing tonight? Great? Good? All right, sounds like we need a focus exercise. I would like to ask everybody in the room to stand up for a minute, please. Everybody stand up. And now just for 5 seconds, I want you to stand on your tippy toes, reach as high as you can, and stretch your body. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good, all right, shake off the day. Good. Have a seat, relax. Yes, I am going to tell you a story tonight. It's a story of life and death, and a story of triumph. It's a story that's been featured on Dateline NBC, on CNN, and speaking of Montel, I was just on Montel 2 weeks ago, so it's very appropriate. But before I do, I would like to ask you all to do me a favor and just try, if you will, to imagine what it would be like if you went into your doctor's office tomorrow and he told you that you had a terminal disease and that you had a very, very short time to live. Imagine what that would feel like. Would your priorities and focus change for that short time that you were alive? Who would you want to call right away? How many people would you want to reach out to and tell them how much you loved them and how much they meant to you in your life? Well, it's hard to do, isn't it? It's very hard, especially when everything's going great, you're young, you're full of energy. It's very difficult. It was very difficult for me. A couple of years ago, I couldn't have even imagined that. I had just returned from Europe working as a software executive, and things were going great for me. My domestic business was going great. I had a beautiful new girlfriend, was approved on a mortgage to buy a new home. And I was also doing great stuff. I was doing charity work, which I'd always loved to do. I was going in every month to the Red Cross to donate my blood, my platelets, for kids with leukemia. That was about all I knew about leukemia at the time, was that the kids that were going through this needed platelets to stay alive. So I went in one day for my donation, and the nurse said, there's something wrong with your blood counts. It's not alarming, but you should definitely go get checked out. And by the way, you look a little bit pale. So well, that's strange. I'm always so healthy. But I went in to see a progression of doctors, and within a week, as the doctor was coming in to give me my diagnosis with tears in his eyes, he told me that I had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and I had probably 5 days left to live without immediate treatment. Just like that. My whole life, my whole identity, everything that who I thought I was just gone. I maybe have 5 days left to live. And I don't have any time to make preparations. I need to check into Stanford Medical Center tomorrow morning or I'm a goner for sure. I can't explain to you the depth of sadness when you realize that all your dreams and hopes and aspirations are gone in an instant. And so that began a series of treatments. It was like being flushed down a black hole, if you can imagine, of just pain and agony, lots of radiation, chemos, in and out of the ICU. And it became very clear that no amount of radiation or chemo was going to cure my disease. I had a very strong type of leukemia, and the only way to treat this leukemia was to basically replace your entire system. And the only way we knew how to do this up until that point was by having a bone marrow transplant. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of a bone marrow transplant. So I also saw many other patients in the hospital that I was being treated with that needed bone marrow transplants, and I said, I have to do something here. There's a lot of people besides just me who need help. So I reached out to the community. I literally put up a card table on the busiest streets in downtown, and I started handing out information about leukemia. I asked for volunteers, I asked people for donations, and the outpouring from the community was just incredible. If you reach out to your community, it's just amazing what a response you'll get. I actually raised $250,000 in 2 months. I got 100 people to volunteer to put together the largest bone marrow registration drive that the San Francisco Bay Area had ever done. It was just amazing. They put up Save Our Eric banners everywhere, and they made a Save Our Eric website. I mean, I just can't tell you the outpouring of support that I got from the community. But still, after all this effort to find a match for me for a bone marrow transplant, there was no match. And after 8 months of treatment, the doctors told me, I'm sorry, but there's nothing else we can do. And we're going to arrange hospice care for you. Well, that wasn't acceptable. I wasn't done. How can they come to me and tell me my life is over? Who are they to make that decision for me? As a matter of fact, I got so angry, I fired them. I said, all right, fine, you guys are done. They actually diagnosed me as being crazy with an adjustment disorder because I wouldn't accept my terminal diagnosis. I said, all right, this guy's, not accepting reality here. So I did whatever I could. It turns out I was adopted, and my half-sister, who I had only met 2 years before, happened to work at the bone marrow transplant center in Seattle. And she got me accepted to an experimental program up there because she was willing to be the donor for the stem cells, for the bone marrow, to try to cure me. So I packed everything. It was the hardest thing I did. I packed all my belongings into boxes. I said goodbye to my friends and neighbors, really mostly expecting never to see anything or see all those people again. And I moved up to Seattle and checked myself into the hospital and began another series of very, very traumatic treatments. Well, as I was preparing to go through a bone marrow transplant, I started to receive phone calls from collection agencies and banks demanding payment on accounts that I had not set up. And when I did some research to find out what was going on, it turns out that a Seattle address was being used in my name and had been for the last few months since I arrived in Seattle. And I knew somebody in this hospital has stolen my identity. Of course, I had a terminal diagnosis. I had very little chances to live. And these people were targeting me because of it. As a matter of fact, they've probably been doing it to patients for a long time. I had to do something about this. I was so angry. I called the FBI. I called the Seattle police. I complained to the hospital administration. Everything I could do from my sickbed, but nobody would lift a finger. People were like, yeah, just cancel the cards and move on. And eventually my family and the doctors came to me and said, Eric, you've got to settle down with this. You have a very little chance of surviving this bone marrow transplant coming up, and you need to focus all your attention on staying alive. I had to agree. And so I buckled down and went through this bone marrow transplant, massive amounts of radiation and chemo, and basically had a bad reaction to the transplant. I went into almost a coma for several weeks. And when I was well enough to leave the hospital after several weeks, and I got back to my apartment in Seattle that I had rented, the collection notices and phone calls and fraudulent accounts had piled up more and more and more. I couldn't believe it. My transplant wasn't doing good. It was failing. I had lost everything in my life.